This is the homework helper for 2-2 in the workbook, comparing and ordering rational numbers. Now what we're working with here in this top part, 1 through 18, same directions for all. We're going to fill in the blank with greater than, less than, or equal to, is we're working with comparing the different forms of rational numbers that we can work with. I've picked a couple different questions here, and we'll talk about the different options you have. In question 1 that I've picked, we're working with two fractions. In question 10 that I've picked, we're working with a fraction and a decimal. Remember, in order to compare things, they really have to be in the same form first off. So they're either going to have to be all fractions or all decimals. Now, number 1, they are all fractions. But remember, the rub on comparing fractions is that in order to compare them, they have to have a common denominator. And very clearly, I do not have that here. So we're going to have to do some work to make that happen. Remember, when we want to get a common denominator, we're going to find the least common multiple of our denominators here in order to get there. Now, technically, what I'm doing there is the least common multiple. You can really do any common multiple to compare them. It's not going to hurt anything. So you can always use the trick that you've probably used at one point or another, which is to say, just multiply by the other denominator. So since this fraction here has a denominator of 8, I'm going to multiply by the other denominator, 10. This one here that's a 10, I'm going to multiply by the other denominator, 8. Well, of course, 8 times 10 and 10 times 8 is going to spit out the same thing, 80, which is how we get a common denominator. And remember, when you do common denominators, whatever you multiply the bottom by, you then multiply the top by that same number, and that's how we then compare our fractions. But I'm going to do least common multiple, least common denominator, just so we can see that. So what you have to do is list the multiples of my two numbers, 8 and 10. So 8 list, remember, think of a times table here. It's going to go 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. And the 10 list is going to go 10, 20, 30, 40. And obviously you've already figured out that the match here is at 40. So the least common multiple of the denominators is 40, and that's going to be my new denominator. Alright, so to change 8 into 40, we would have to multiply by 5, and we know that because 8 times 5 is 40. So I'm going to multiply the top by 5 as well, and 1 times 5 is 5. To change 10 into 40, I'm going to multiply by 4, so I'm going to multiply this by 4 as well, and 1 times 4 is 4. And remember, when we compare fractions, once they have a common denominator, then all we have to do is compare those numerators. Obviously, if one was positive and one was negative, we know the positive would automatically be bigger. But in this case, the 5 is bigger than the 4, so I'm going to fill this in with greater than. Now, number 10 is a little bit different. Same thing they're looking for. We're going to fill in the blank with greater than, less than, or equal to. But as you can see, one's a fraction, one's a decimal. Here's where you have to make a choice. You're either going to go all fractions or all decimals at this point. My guess would be that you're probably going to want to go all decimal because you already know how easy it is to change a fraction into a decimal. As we saw in just the last section, all you have to do is divide. So that 11/15ths, I'm going to do 11 divided by 15, which is, again, a great calculator problem. And lo and behold, when I do that, I ended up with 0.73, and we see on the calculator screen that that 3 repeats there. So that means it's actually the exact same thing as the other option. So in this case, since we know they are both 0.73 with the 3 repeating, this time we're going to fill in the blank with equal to. A decimal is generally going to be the easier way. So even if they were both fractions, you could probably still change them both into decimals and compare them more easily than perhaps doing the least common denominator work like we did in question 1. And again, all you have to do to change them to a decimal is divide. Numerator divided by denominator, or top number divided by bottom number, whatever you want to call it.